in a bid to loosen state control of the economy, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has implemented a series of reforms. Last week came the latest as the government announced that the government-owned Ethio Telecom was opening up to foreign investors. I'm joined by Global Chairman for Fairfax Africa Fund, Zemedeneh Negatu, for more. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today. Tell us the details about this new announcement. How long will it be until we see actual investors putting in money?
Right. First of all, thank you for having me. As you said, last week, the Parliament passed a proclamation to establish the regulatory body. I think if you go back a few months ago, I think the Prime Minister announced that some of the major state-owned enterprises, in particular Ethio Telecom, will be privatized. So this is a further step towards that end game, which is liberalization. I think that's the key word here, liberalization, which includes partial privatization of Ethio Telecom. What does liberalization mean? As was indicated and as reported in many other places and as the government has announced, they're going to be introducing competition into the telecom market, which today is a monopoly, a state-owned monopoly, which has created the largest in-country telecom in Africa, which is Ethio Telecom, which has 61 million customers, of which about 42 million are active subscribers. So what they're going to try to introduce is competition by issuing, I believe, 2 licenses. I think that's official now, 2 additional new licenses, and also partial privatization of Ethio Telecom, where the Ethiopian government will own 51% initially, and private investors, major multinationals and telco operators will own the 49%. That's the concept. But for that to happen, they needed to first set up the legislation, the regulatory body, which from everything we've seen is based on global best practices. And the next step will be staffing it. But as the answer to your question, the direct question is, we expect the tenders to come off both for Ethio Telecom and also for the new licenses in the next few months. Exactly when is not known, but definitely the government officials have made the announcement that will be in the next 5-6 months. Certainly before the end of this year, there will be a tender announced, and the big companies, which have expressed very strong interest, to start bidding on that opportunity.
Right. We've seen, like you said, reports of that interest from big companies like MTN. We have Vodafone, Orange, Safaricom. We know that Ethio Telecom, works with Safaricom already for fiber. What do you think is going to be the thought process in knowing who to work with?
Well, my understanding, I think everybody's expectation is going to be an open tender. So anybody, you should expect the big ones who already have interest in Africa, the ones you mentioned, Vodafone, Safaricom, MTN, Orange, and others, who Etisalat included, to be bidding for this. In fact, it's interesting, last week, the Innovation in Africa conference, the annual conference, was held in Addis. All of the big ones who have a very strong interest in Africa already and very strong interest in the Ethiopian market were essentially very strong sponsors, headline sponsors of this conference, because they wanted to be seen in the marketplace as being future active players. And I think MTN had its CEO, Orange has some of its top executives in town, Vodafone, the same thing. So my expectation, there'll be a very strong bidding process amongst the 5. The reason is simple. This is the last large telecom monopoly in the world today of this size, with a huge upside potential. And all of them will tell you, the CEOs of the big telcos will tell you that they're very eager to enter the market, because there's really nothing else out there of this size, potentially of this size, in the world, not just in Africa. So I would expect a very strong bidding process, both for the new licenses, but also for the incumbent Ethio Telecom. They've made investments, very significant investments, just to talk about Ethio Telecom, over the last 7-8 years, fiber optics, and also expanding the mobile network from something like less than 3 million about 6-7 years ago, as I said, to 61 million. Still, there's a huge, Ethiopia is a country of 108 million people. And this year, the GDP is expected to grow by 9%, at the top end of any growth that you would see anywhere in the emerging economies. So that's what is exciting a lot of these telcos, is the upside potential of the growth. And I would expect very strong bidding by all of the major players from around the world.
Right. What do you think the broader meaning is of this move that the government has made? What's the broader meaning for the Ethiopian economy?
Excellent question. 2 things. One, it's a reflection of the private sector is now going to start taking more of the lead in Ethiopia's economy. I think that's the big statement when the Prime Minister made the announcement of the privatization, the liberalization, all the policy reforms, for example, the ease of doing business reforms that he's announced. All this is sending a message that from here onwards, the private sector will have a bigger role than in the past. I mean, listen, the developmental state model delivered 10% plus GDP growth for 12 years. But it kind of has to evolve as we've seen it in China and South Korea and other Asian tigers. And I think the Ethiopians are trying to do the same thing. Is essentially now we build the infrastructure, we build a lot of things, capex in the past 5-7 years by the government. But now you, the private sector, you have to start taking the lead where it's possible. By the way, we're not expecting the government to completely move out of the economic activity. No, that's not possible, and I don't think that's advisable. What it means, though, is the statement it stands is private sector, you will have a bigger role. You're going to have, and then also this private-public partnership model that the government is introducing, that's going to be the lead model, especially in infrastructure. That's the first thing. The second thing, specifically on telecom liberalization, it's not just the beneficiary is not just the telecom sector. It's the technology sector, the manufacturing sector, is even the agriculture sector. Because when you liberalize, when you introduce competition, when you introduce new technologies very efficiently, very competitively, you start affecting positively the overall economy. Even though Ethiopia has been growing by 9 or 10, 11% over the last 13 years, from here onwards, $100 billion GDP to grow by 10% needs new innovations, new reforms. And I think that's the clearest message the government is introducing now, the Prime Minister is introducing now, saying, folks, from here onwards, what delivered in the past, we'll keep what was good, what is doable, but we're going to let the private sector also have a bigger role. I think for me that's the broader statement, but also the telecom sector's transformation. Ethiopia is trying to be like Kenya, for example, Silicon Savannah in Kenya. I think we can have something similar in Ethiopia, but it needs a very efficient, effective, liberalized telecom sector. And these are some of the messages I think that are coming out of these new policy reforms.
Right. Zemedeneh, just before I let you go, we've seen news about tech services being shut down in Ethiopia since last Tuesday, and we've also heard about the internet being shut down in years before, I think once in 2016, also in 2017, and even before that. Do you think that these events are something that could possibly dissuade possible investors?
To be frank with you, last week, what we heard, the reason there was a shutdown of the internet for 3 days is because there was national exams and they were trying to prevent cheating. At least that's the talk. Obviously, there hasn't been anything official, but the widely held assumption is this. Because so assume is a one-off. In fact, there was speculation because the examinations are continuing this week. The internet is run, as you know, you and I are now communicating on Skype. So it is up and running. I don't think this will dissuade any investor in the past, but I think the government also is aware that there are other mechanisms of preventing cheating by instead of like shutting down the entire internet, because the Ethiopian economy is now very much integrated to the global economy. It's not what it was 10, 15 years ago. And I think the impact on the economy would be very substantial to shut down the internet. So I think the government smartly has moved away from shutting down the internet completely. I think last week, in my view, was a one-off. Maybe there was just overabundance of caution that they did that. We don't know what the official reason, but I think everybody's widely speculated is because of the national exams. And I personally don't expect it to repeat because, as I said, we're now heavily dependent on technology, the internet. Ethiopia is it's an evolving manufacturing hub. Exporters need the internet for connection to process export, the banks. So I honestly don't. First of all, it won't dissuade any of the big telcos from what happened last week, which was a 3-day shutdown.
Sure.
Secondly, I think it was just an exceptional one-off event. It didn't repeat this week because there was a lot of speculation that because the exams are running until tomorrow, that it might be shut down. It's not, as was testimony. But so assume this was a one-off, and then we move on.
Right. Thank you so much, Zemedeneh, for joining us on the show today. We look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you very much.